quick start, man. You want to quickly introduce yourself, the Gourmet Jar, how long it's been, and your journey?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, I'm Apeksha. I'm the founder of a brand of premium condiments called the Gourmet Jar. And I started this about 10 years back. In fact, next week is our 10-year anniversary. It was like a passion turned into a business. I started from my home kitchen I just started from a passion of cooking. And over the years, of course, it's built into a full-fledged business. And I've learned a lot of things the hard way. And we make condiments like preserves, honey, mustard, pasta sauces, pestos, spreads and dips, which are all natural, no preservatives, still have a shelf life. And we've been in the retail space for the last 7 years or so. And in fact, on the D2C front, it was something that we did after COVID. So we were quite, I would say, new in the D2C space. And it's been because of the way I started my journey and the time that I started, it was a more offline heavy brand. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. And
So 10 years, man. Congratulations on 10 years.
Thank you.
I guess at the time you began, 2011, D2C wasn't a thing, right? Not in India.
Exactly, yeah. Because firstly, I started, it was a home business. Secondly, at that time, forget D2C, startups, all this thing was just new. And even food and beverage and all, it was completely new. Like it wasn't really, prevalent at that time. There were very few brands doing this kind of stuff, so yeah.
By the way, I've had some of your products and they're fantastic. I've had the honey in the almonds and honey. This is a couple of years ago. And the walnuts, I think. Yeah. And they were very nice. So you've been in the retail space for 7 years.
Right.
So I guess at that point, retail was one of the natural sort of ways to go, right? It wasn't, because the internet wasn't as penetrated then, it wasn't as widespread.
Right, yeah.
So how's that experience been? How did you start? What is your first sort of point of contact? Where did you first go? Who did you first contact?
So honestly, a lot of things happened organically for me in the beginning, and I was actually for 2.5 years it was a home business, and then I started getting a few calls from some natural stores, organic stores, and a few hotels and cafes who wanted to keep the stock, and that's how I kind of started. Distribution and like actually modern trade and all of that like happened a little later, like more towards 2015-16, and so initially it was more of an organic pull, and then eventually is when we had to obviously when it became a serious business and had to make a plan towards it. In terms of journey, it's been quite crazy. It's like lots of ups and downs. Offline retail is it's like a big monster, I would say, very, very challenging, and requires a lot of capital and a lot of patience. I think patience is very, very important because there's a lot that you have to deal with when it comes to offline, because things are not in your control always,
Yeah.
Online where
I'm so glad you brought up challenges, because I feel like that's a big, everyone unanimously talks about the cash flow challenges associated with pursuing the offline market, and we'll get to that in a minute. But like on a broad stroke level at the moment, given how the environment is, and D2C is obviously growing and people are buying directly from brands fairly often, is it something that at the moment, if you had to start the journey this year versus 2011 or 2012, would you have pursued retail just as aggressively, or do you think that the online sales can compensate for retail sales?
I think that if I was to start it now, obviously I would build the online channel first, I would say, because it's easier to build than offline. Offline takes more time, but I think eventually I would definitely do the offline bit, because I think for any brand like mine, an omni-channel approach is a must, because you do need, ultimately with D2C, there is a certain time lag from the time the customer places the order till they get it, and sometimes people want just like on the spot, they have a party today, they want to make something tonight for dinner, so they need it. So I think with brands like us, you have to be quickly accessible, and I think offline is definitely very, very important, because when people see you year after year, on store after store, the same products there, the same brand there, then that's how they build. I think for me, my brand was built. The whole visibility and branding all was built because of that, because we were available for the last 7 years on shelves and people have seen it, and that's what they tell me. We've seen your products here, we've seen your products there. With D2C, I think it's about, and of course with D2C, you're competing with a lot of other brands for the attention, and the attention of the customer is also very less, I think, online, and online it's more about, I think, discounts, and loyalty is lesser, I feel, with offline, I think the customer stickiness is much more.
But do you feel like because you don't possess that data, right, of which customer is buying your product and how often the same customer, so let's say Nature's Basket orders from you repeatedly. Yeah. So for you, Nature's Basket is the customer, and then they sell it to their 50, 100, 500 customers, right? Do you feel like that is slightly limiting, that you don't have access to that data point?
Yeah, it's very, very limiting. In fact, for the first few years, I did not know, when investors would ask what's your repeat rate, I don't know, because I'm supplying to the same store, but I don't know ultimately, if the same customer is buying it, or, I mean, you don't get those kind of metrics, obviously.
Yes.
So that is definitely a challenge, and that's an advantage of D2C, that you have the data, you can analyze your customers' behavior, you know the repeat purchase rate, what the average order value, all of that, which is, of course, something which is missing in offline retail. You don't get that insight.
Correct. Yeah, I guess like in the current ecosystem, you got to define the persona of your buyer, and because you don't possess that data, that might be difficult. So I can almost imagine that investor conversation saying,
yeah, especially if you're talking to investors, because they will all ask you, what's your repeat rate. And only the last 2-3 years when we started doing, more D2C and we are available online and all this, when we've actually been able to analyze that data and get that information.
Correct. So in order to pursue the offline market, right? This is what I've gathered. So we have one range of products in granola trade, and we're launching one more in spices. I went to the shops closest to my house. And I tried to hook up meetings and asked who the owner is, because these local shops, I didn't go to the chains. Yeah. And I said, hey, this is my product. Would you like to keep it on your shelf? And I had lots of challenges. But generally speaking, that still gives me access to maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 shops in my locality. I can load stuff in my car and drive around Bombay and spend it. And I'll not meet more than 30 shops, right? So one has to think of this slightly with a larger horizon, saying, hey, if I want to let's start with only one city. Let's start only with Bombay. Never mind going to Pune, Nagpur, Delhi, Gurgaon, Chennai. Let's start with Bombay. So just from a first step point of view, what is the first thing one should do? Should it be a distributor? Should it be direct meetings with store owners or HQs of the Nature's Baskets and Food Halls of the world? What's like the best entry point? How do you get your foot in the door?
So I think, so to start out with, I think like with the approach that you had to, approach your local stores and kind of keep the product there and see how it's moving. That's a good first step, because that gives you an idea whether it's actually moving, not moving, or what are the challenges that you're facing. Once you, I think, have established the acceptance of the product maybe, and of course, these have to be very relevant stores as per your positioning, in a way. So once I think if the product acceptance is there, if it's moving, then I think there are two things that have to happen parallelly, like, a distributor and talking to the modern trade or, the HQ or whatever. That has to happen parallelly, because what happens is, so a distributor is more like, they will obviously supply your POs and all of that. But at the same time, the listing has to be done by the brand directly. Mostly, unless you find a distributor who's also doing your marketing, then, when there are some certain people who do distribution and marketing, then they do the listing and all for you. But otherwise, the brand mostly has to do the listing directly with the store in a way. And it has to be with the category manager of that chain in a sense. And the list, the commercials, the listing, the margins, all of that are discussed by the brand, and then the distributor is appointed generally to supply the POs in a way. And you need a distributor because locally you can still do direct distribute, you can directly supply to the store. But say if I want to supply it in Bombay or Bangalore or any other city, the time that it would take for me to send my product, especially if you have heavy products like mine in glass jars, I'll have to send them by surface, and the time it takes from here till say Bombay, Bangalore, it's too long. And if a store is releasing a PO, they will want the supply within 48 hours or so, next day or next to next day. And that becomes a challenge if you're doing it directly, unless it's the same city. So that's what we did. We kept Delhi NCR distribution with us for a long time, and appointed distributors in other cities. And eventually, when the scale went up, is when we gave the Delhi NCR to a distributor as well. So both these things have to happen parallelly. So listing has to happen with the stores, with the category managers in those stores, and then the distribution, you appoint the distributor to supply the products and the POs and the payments and all of that, of course.
So typically, can you talk us about the listing process again? I kind of didn't fully catch that. Maybe others may have. I apologize. But can you talk us through what the technical process of listing is?
So in offline retail, any chain that you work with, so unless they are your neighborhood kirana stores or bakeries, those are different. They probably will just keep your products without any listing fee. So there's something called a listing fee. So any whether it's Nature's Basket, Food Hall, Modern Bazaar, Le Marché, any of these, they will all have, the Namdhari of the world, they all have a listing fees, which is basically to enter your product into their store, just to get it on the shelf, you have to pay a certain amount. So, which is typically in the range of 5,000 to 10,000 per SKU per store. So, for example, if say a Nature's Basket has 40 stores and you want to list 10 SKUs, so it'll be say 50,000 per store for that one, for your 10 products in a way.
Sure.
So the listing fees generally runs into lakhs with all these bigger chains. And that is the biggest challenge, I think, with brands to enter the offline retail, because see, the store space is limited, and if you want to get your brand on the shelf, they need to take some other brand out probably, that's a one-time fees that you have to pay to get your brands in, to get your products in. And that's something like you have to do always. Like tomorrow if you launch 5 more products or 2 new products or even different SKUs, if it's a smaller version or a bigger version, whatever, so every time you list a new product or new SKU in the store, you have to pay the listing fees, that way. This becomes a very, very heavy, that hence I said working capital is a big requirement, because not working capital is a big requirement, because every time you enter any store or chain, they charge a lot of, like 24/7 is probably going to like end up charging you like 30 lakhs. That's what they quote, brands to list in their stores for, so that's something.
So I'll share my example just to segue off this point. I spoke to somebody at Nature's Basket and they said, hey, we'll charge you 7,500 rupees per SKU per Nature's Basket. Right. And then I asked him, okay, let's say I start with 4 Nature's Baskets, but how do you guarantee me that you'll keep my products on your shelf for a certain amount of time? And he said, no. I said, if it doesn't move in a week, you have the power to take it down and my 7,500 is sunk. And he said, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
That kind of threw me off.
That's how retail works, So one thing is you pay listing fees to enter, and to answer just this question, no, it's not a per month thing. So you have a listing fee, which is a one-time thing. And then after that, of course, you're giving them margin. So most of these big chains will take 35% margin on MRP. So that margin is, for all the sales of whatever shipments you're doing, supplies you're doing to them. And then of course, after that, if it doesn't move, they can send it back to you. So there's something called RTV, return to vendor. So when the stock is close to expiry, or, if it's not moving, they'll just RTV the stock. And that's obviously your loss. Then they'll just issue a debit note, because they anyway owe you money. So that's how retail works. So these challenges are there. So of course you have to ensure, and then to make sure that your product moves from the shelf, then you have to kind of, invest in visibility. So maybe you have to rent the shelf space from them if you want prime shelf space, like, high level or something like that. Then of course you also have to do sampling. So, last 2 years not happened much, but before COVID, there would be a lot of promoters and, people who stand there and do sampling of a product. And they charge you for that as well. So definitely they want you to invest in promotion and marketing, once you list the product. You don't have to pay monthly fees apart from that, but if you want, so sometimes, you have, you enter your products, you list your product, but maybe they're kept at the bottom shelf, or they're kept so obviously customers will not see it.
Correct.
Then you have to kind of also build the relationship with them to make sure that, and relationship building in offline is very, very important, with the store managers who are there on ground level. So talking to those people, and over the years you build a relationship, and then they see that your products are moving, then they kind of give you better visibility even without charging a lot and things like that.
Correct. But it must be difficult, right? I mean, if you've got presence in so many stores in so many cities, I can maintain good relationships with store managers in my neighborhood, But as soon as the cities are removed, it becomes difficult to, but I guess it's a function of, do you talk to the store? So if the ones that you supply to directly, who's your point of contact? Let's say from Nature's Basket, if you supply to them directly versus a distributor, is it one central purchase manager, or every store has their own purchase manager?
Or category managers who basically take care of categories. So different categories, like there'll be say obviously healthcare category, there'll be personal care category, whatever. So all of that. So category managers are who you connect with for listing your products basically.
Got it.
Once they do the listing and all, then of course, the purchase team is there, which will release the POs and stuff. And some stores follow a central purchase, some do not. With some stores on a store level, with some like Nature's Basket, it has a DC, and you supply their central purchase. But say for example, a Food Hall or Modern Bazaar, they are very, very individual. They even have individual billings and everything. So different GSTs.
Okay.
So it depends on the store that you are supplying to. And then of course over there, then you have to, your point of contact is the store manager.
Got it. So let's talk about a few of the financial implications that you cited, right, of going into one of these shops. Obviously, one is the big listing fee, which could range from 5,000 to 10,000 rupees per SKU per store. Yeah. So if you have a dozen products, you're looking at 50,000, 60,000 to a lakh just per store. And if you want to have it in a dozen stores, then you probably have to pay for prime real estate within the shelf space. If you're right at the bottom, it's not moving. Right on top, it's not moving.
Yeah.
And this is, you'd say, it's a blanket rule for all categories of products. It's not. Is it more for, let's say, like a brand of chocolates, or is it lesser for a brand of let's say granola, for lack of a better word, or this is like a blanket rule for everybody?
I think it's for everybody, but I think if they're all like, if the brand is very well established, then generally you have like good relationships, and then they tend to prefer, keeping, because also it depends on what the customer wants, right? If the customer is asking for your product, then they will try to give you better, that happens over time, if people like are going to the store and asking for your brand, if it's not there, then they kind of give you more importance in a way.
Yeah, I guess that gives you a bargaining chip, right? Once your brand is more established and the customers coming for your products.
Right.
The other thing that so stocking fee was one, and then you spoke about this interesting thing where you said they mark down the products by 35%. So if your product is MRPing for 100 rupees, they only buy it for 65.
Right, yeah.
And the rest is a margin that they keep. And any promotions that they do, sometimes we go into a store and we see, hey, one pay, one free, or we see today 100, or normally 100, now 85. Is that to be borne also by the brand, or is that a function of the store?
Typically, it would be by the brand. It depends. Sometimes they would, do a deal with you and like maybe do a split. Maybe, for example, sometimes very, very rarely, like only I think a D-Mart I've heard, they like, we don't work with D-Mart, but I've heard because they take any which way a huge margin. They take like some 40-50% margin. So they give the discounts from their side because that's their model, business model in a way. But from most of the stores, they will ask the brand to, bear that discount.
So you can expect a call tomorrow from one of the store managers saying, hey, Apeksha, we think like a 20% discount would be really good. Diwali aa raha hai, so let's knock it down. We'll bet 10%, you bet 10%.
Yeah.
That's a call one can expect.
You can expect that, and you sometimes need to do it, and sometimes if you don't do it, then they kind of, get angry as well, like, or they won't, like, they'll try to like, trouble you then in a way if you don't really, because, and that's why this is all about the relationship building, right? Because sometimes you have to just invest for building that relationship with them, so that, because if you show them, okay, I'm supporting you with, because, these people also have their targets and all of that, and they need to get these deals going. So if you support them, then tomorrow they'll support you back in a way.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it boils down to a lot to do relationships, right? And you got to navigate some of their requests, and
exactly.
If you do that, then they might accommodate your vice versa. Yeah. So I believe there are two primary ways in which, and pardon me, I don't know the jargon, but there are two primary ways in which you can supply products to stores. One is they buy it off you at the discounted price, and they may choose to do whatever they may choose to do with it. And if it comes to expiration, is their loss. And the other is the consignment basis, where I can go to a shop and say, "Aap 100 dabbe chhod ke jao, ek mahine baad aana, how many ever are left, you take the money for that. And those that are not left, I'll either keep it or I'll return it to you." So therefore the risk is higher on the brand. So do you know in principle, I'm saying in theory, what the models are and what is then more prevalent in practice?
So like the first one that you said, where they buy it from you and then, if it doesn't sell, it's their loss, that I'm telling you will never really happen unless it's like a small store that really wants a product, because in the whole retail, like this RTV thing is there. So whichever chain you work with, whichever store you work with, like, because they will owe you money when nobody's paying you advance, right? So they will just debit you whatever the stock is expiring. So it's never really their loss. I mean, I've never really experienced this in my, 7 years of working retail, that is their loss. Secondly, the thing is consignment. So consignment doesn't happen typically with all these kind of, because you'll be supplying for a distributor, and a distributor, you will bill them, they will bill the store. So consignment maybe you can do with like maybe some neighborhood store or some small store that you can connect directly, but none of the bigger chains will ever do a consignment model. That doesn't work because there's too many complications. Who's going to keep a track of the amount of stock and all of that? So, and in the end, if you look at it, it's kind of consignment, because if something doesn't sell and expires, it's anyway coming back to
you.
Yeah. But just that from the financial perspective, it is a sale in the beginning. It's not a consignment. Nobody really works. This. I think consignment thing happens more in marketplace in these smaller, online stores, but not really with the offline stores, because they don't have the system to kind of send you a sales report at the end of the month and then you bill them and all that. That doesn't happen. It's an outright sale basically.
So you said something interesting. You said you bill the distributor.
Yeah.
So let's say you are my distributor in Bangalore and I'm based out of Bombay, and you say, hey, send me 100 units. I've got these 10 shops that I supply to.
Yeah.
So I send you my 100 units and I bill you 100 units at 100 rupees each, less 30% discount, etc. So 7,000 ka bill is. So I'll bill you.
Yeah. So basically, you have to also factor distributor margin. So 35% is the store margin, right?
Oh yeah.
Margin. Yeah. So basically, suppose if your product is 100 rupees, you will bill the distributor at like 55. So 10% is roughly distributor margin.
Oh, that's a heavy margin, yeah. 10%.
Yeah, so that's what the margins in retail have to be, because and most likely you need if you're going to other cities, you will need a distributor. It's very hard to supply directly to stores in other cities, and because also with these stores you need a GRN, you need a receiving, if you're supplying, because unless they give you a GRN, then they don't. Tomorrow if you ask them for payment, they'll say like, okay, GRN though, then if there's no GRN, then they don't pay you.
So what is GRN again? Sorry to interrupt.
The goods received note. So every time, suppose you supply 100 pieces to them, or suppose your distributor supplying 100 pieces to them, then they will send a GRN, okay, that we've received 100, or maybe if one is damaged, then they'll say, okay, we've received 99, but the invoice is for 100. So then, and then if you don't have the GRN, then they don't pay you. That's what happens typically.
Got it.
So that's why 99% you will eventually, if you need to expand to the city, you need a distributor. So you bill the distributor at like say 55 rupees, and then the distributor will bill the retailer at 65 rupees, and then the retailer bills the consumer at 100, like that. So, and these are all sales. So you're doing an outright sale to the distributor, and the distributor does a sale to the retailer. And then when
sorry, go on. Sorry to interrupt.
I think even if the return happens, so the retailer will debit the distributor, and the distributor will debit you in turn, basically.
Got it. So you raise the bill for the distributor reimburses you. And what is the typical sort of time period? Because this is where the cash flow problems arise, right? Because if you're supplying in large quantities, a lot of money is stuck with the distributor potentially. And then if they take, your vendors may give you a 2-week, 3-week, 1-month credit period, but those guys take 3 months to pay.
Right.
And that's a big sort of, and especially for younger companies, most of us here are fairly young. So it's, just to manage that day-to-day money, paisa aa raha hai, par atak gaya hai. What do you do? And I know businesses that have shut down on account of
it is a big problem, because they don't pay. 2-3 weeks is like a dream. It'll never happen. So average retailers like these chains, they'll take like 45. On paper, they'll probably have like a 45-day credit period, and in reality, they'll probably take like 60, 65, 75 days to pay. And they'll obviously pay the distributor, and the distributor will pay you. So typically, even distributors have like a 45 days credit as well. And but it also depends. Like there are some distributors who say the retailer does not pay them for your brand, and they will not pay you. But there are some distributors who are like very professional, like, okay, 45th day I will release the payment no matter what happens, whenever I get. There are some very few distributors like that, but there are some like that. So it really depends on the distributor. And but yeah, average, I think you can expect your payments in like 60 days time, not before, And with chains like Modern Bazaar, that's like, if you speak to anybody who works with them, it's like 6 months, 8 months. So
really?
Yeah.
That's sad, yeah. I know Food Hall has a bad reputation as well. I don't know if that's true. It's a hearsay. I've heard Food Hall is a very bad paymaster.
All of them are, but Modern Bazaar is the worst. So they all are really bad.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think Modern Bazaar is the Delhi one, that they're the worst of the lot. Yeah.
But you spoke of the few distributors who release payments at 45 days because they're ethically very strong. Please pass on their leads to us. I think all of us here will really benefit from having such nice paymasters. But so there's one pressing topic of being part of retail that all of us have struggled with. If you look at the last 3 months of our chat, it's an omnipresent. Every other week, someone brings this up. How do we? So there is, obviously you have your packaging, you have your FSSAI certification that allows you to sell these products, again within license and state registration and so on. And then you have your food lab testing and your food nutritional facts, right? So there's two elements. One is the food nutritional facts and how, while I know it's mandatory to put, what is the emphasis that at the retail level that they put on it. And number two is the whole barcoding piece. That's one thing that's been a frequent topic of discussion, and none of us have arrived at a logical solution. And then there's something that says EAN is free, and then you go to the GS1 website and it's going to like burn a hole in your pocket. And we're always confused about the best way to. So what is the expectation? Because Amazon, for example, allows you an exemption if you don't have the GS1, GTIN code, etc. What is the tolerance level at the retail level?
No, so you don't need GS1. So I till date do not have GS1 barcodes. Been managing with EAN barcodes that I've like bought online. So retailers don't have a problem. It's not like they'll tell you that you need a GS1 barcode specifically. So as long as you have a barcode, that works. And essentially for their system, they need to, map all the inventory against that barcode basically. So they need something which they can scan and they can put the inventory against that in a way.
Yeah.
So the EAN barcodes, that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. We've just been buying EAN barcodes online and using those.
Are they cheap? Because we struggle with getting, because I went looking for an EAN barcode and Zoho has an EAN barcode generator free. So I did that, and then it took me to it said you gotta have a GS1 ka 3 numbers, and then you go back in the GS1 ecosystem, and then you have to pay that 40,000 rupees for a year.
Basically, the GS1 is like, I think if you get more into exports, then it's good to have the GS1 because then it identifies the country of origin essentially. That's what the GS1 barcode. I think it's like 0900080 something like that. So
got it.
Indian code. So I think if you're doing exports, it's good to have the GS1 because. So then it kind of identifies that this is an Indian product. But I think if you're doing domestic market, it doesn't really matter. You can get any kind of barcode, which is obviously have to be unique, in a way. That's so. Yeah.
So at your end, do you input the data of the product? So would you say, hey, this is the gourmet jar honey, walnuts and honey priced at 199 MRP? Is that what you do on your end, or this is what stock keeping they do at their end, at the retail end?
So anytime you list a product, so they will send you this NPI sheet, which is like a new product introduction sheet, which will have like, some 100 columns that you have to fill for all your products.
Oh.
That is where you input all the information. So the brand has to input that one time, thing in the beginning. Then obviously that's where you put in your barcode against a certain product. And then every time you send it to that gets, uploaded in their system. And then whenever you send your stocks to the store, they scan it and it maps against that barcode.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was figuring out logistically. So each SKU has a unique barcode.
Yeah.
So even if you've got the same product in 3 different size jars, you have unique barcodes.
Yeah.
Okay. So good to know that the GS1 isn't mandatory and EA, and someone just put on the group saying the printer printed it for them.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. GS1 barcode, really?
Yeah, my packaging printer made one for me for free. So please send it to us also. Send us your printer. Printer as in not the machine, right? Your the offline printer, the person. Okay. I had a couple of. So the other thing, the nutritional facts. How that's obviously it's mandatory, right?
Yeah. So you have to get your products tested by the lab, and then you have to use that nutritional info on your the label basically.
Yeah.
That is mandatory, and along with that, there are lots of. So basically, more than FSSI, it's the legal metrology department which really troubles you. So you have to follow a lot of guidelines, in terms of the label basically.
Got it.
You have to have certain sizes, certain things that have to be like the veg dot, non-veg dot has to be of a certain size as per your packaging size. The font has to be of a certain size. There are certain things that are mandatory, like country of origin is mandatory now. And of course, they keep changing rules every year. So you have to keep
Is there any one sort of central repository or a website where one can be updated? Because we create our own packaging in-house and I have effectively no idea of what
apparently all this info is there on the legal metrology site. But good luck reading through it and good luck figuring it out. It's very difficult. I think so. The best thing is to get an agent or a consultant who does this for a living, and you just verify your labels with them and they'll tell you what to do. That's what I've been doing.
This is another challenge, right? Now, these food consultants are, this is kind of off topic a bit, but very often I'm not from the food trade like you weren't 10 years ago and you've learned over time. I'm kind of learning as I go. I don't know the right jargon to call this person. Who am I looking for? The guy who can give me all these tips. Some of them sort of walk around saying we're food consultants, and some of them say we are food technologists. And the jargon kind of throws us off, saying who's the guy I contact to build all these basic functionalities in place.
Right. So not technologists. I think food technology is somebody you hire in-house for developing your products.
Sure.
Food technology is somebody who will kind of do tests for you maybe in-house, or who will tell you how to get a better shelf life for products. And basically, they're more product related as such.
Okay.
But even I don't know, honestly. Generally, they're legal people like lawyers who are consultants essentially. So they should have a legal background typically. And a lot of these lawyers do this food consult, because they know the laws, right, of the legal metrology department or FSI department. So it's a lot of it's legal work essentially. So I think typically they should be lawyers, who are consultants.
I think that makes sense. Sense. I think we've arrived at most of our topics that you and I offline chatted about, Apeksha. One question that we just somehow came up was, because some products have a longer shelf life and some don't have a long shelf life.
Right.
Does that create friction between distributors? Is a product with a shorter shelf life more difficult to sell effectively? It is,
yes,
right?
always. Yeah. The longer the shelf life, the easier, because especially cold chain products are a nightmare.
Correct.
Because in India our supply chain is firstly not good. Secondly, then even in the stores when they keep it, how they keep it, they store it, all of that. Cold chain products, the return is like typically very very high. And of course, like a 1 year shelf life is good, a 2 year shelf life is even better, but depends on what kind of product you're selling, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, if it's longer shelf life, then lesser chance of return in a way. The shorter the shelf life, the more your RTU will. Yeah.
So then it's a function of how you want to try and increase shelf life, and you enter a certain product category that has allows you to keep.
If you're doing like with a cold chain product, if you have like a 1 month shelf life, a few weeks shelf life, it's going to be very very challenging. If with a ambient temperature product, like at least 6 months is like basic that you need, because also the customers stop picking up the product after like 50% of shelf life.
Yeah.
And by the time it's made and then it goes to a distributor, from distributor to retailer and all, it's any which way maybe a month old or so.
Got it. Just how what is the frequency at which the distributor orders from, or one can expect orders from a distributor? Because I would assume that the distributor is sitting in every city. There's a unique distributor, and then today, and they might have smaller drop-offs at the chain. They won't do big. And so if they order 100 units from the brand, they might drop off 2 at this Nature's Basket, 5 at this Nature's Basket, 10 at this food hall. So at what frequency can one expect? Is it very frequent? Is it like
twice a month actually? Once or twice. If you're really planned, then it could even be once a month. But of course, that depends on how much data you have and how well your forecast is. Because obviously, when you supply to distributors, you have to have a certain forecast. So I think eventually you start off maybe twice a month, and then eventually once you have proper data and when you can forecast well, then even once a month works. But I think a couple of times a month is good.
And it's operationally obviously very chaotic and challenging, right? It depends on the strength of your team and how well forecasted you are. If you kind of know what to expect, then it's better.
Right. Yeah, of course, there are always like incidents where, like suddenly we'll be like, okay, khatam ho gaya. And also there are sometimes random orders that come, right? Like maybe a Nature's Basket will have like a customer order, like who wants 100 pieces suddenly, when it's not. So then so there are cases like that when, you have to like maybe then ship it by trains for teachers in 2 days instead of like 5-6 days, that way. So there are urgent requirements, and obviously forecast also goes up and down sometimes.
So then now give me a hint on how do you price your products, right? Because you're saying an average retailer keeps 35%, an average distributor keeps 10%. So you're down 45%. And that that hasn't even started to begin your logistics cost, storage cost, and losses and so on and so forth, like returns and all that. So typically, I know theoretically, if you go and try to price a product, it says, hey, your cost of goods times 4 is a healthy margin. But then when 2 parts of that are going towards just distribution and retail cost, pricing, do you have any tips to share with us younger guys on how to arrive? Because it's also now almost expected that you have to discount your products heavily.
Correct.
And on the internet and on Amazon and at retail.
Online definitely, I think discounting is more prevalent. Offline, you don't do that much.
Not so much. Okay.
It's very rare to do. Only maybe Diwali time, like you have to give offers, something like that. It's not that common to discount offline.
Got it.
So I think there are 2 things that you have to follow. One is of course like 4-5 times the cost. That's like a more COGS approach, that okay, whatever your COGS are, you 4-5 times and then the MRP. And then other approaches, of course, like competition. So you have to obviously be cognizant of that. So maybe your cost may be high, but then if you price it like really high and that's above competition, then it will not probably move. So I think you have to balance those 2 things. Your cost as well as and what happens is then sometimes maybe you're making a larger margin on some products and lesser on some products. So it balances in a way. And then again, you have to see like if it's something that has a potential to be a fast moving item, then even a slightly lesser margin is okay.
I guess that's important to keep a track of, right? What is moving fast, what's a good workhorse, and therefore you kind of optimize pricing on that, packaging on that, distribution on that.
But I think if you're on a blended average, you see if you have 50-60% margin on, like for example, if your cost is say 50 and you're selling it for 100 to the distributor, then that's a very good, healthy number.
Yeah, I think that, so again, this is all like the bookish data that I've gathered from Shark Tank. They say landed cost is 100 rupees, we sell for in America, we sell for 200 and MRP is 400, and that seems okay. Okay, so you're saying between your cost of goods sold and your distributor's acquisition cost, if there's a 100% increase, That's
a good number. Yeah, that's
and if you can further optimize that, then even better. But that is a reasonable
right
sort of metric to aim for, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. But all in all, in your last 3 years of D2C, and you've seen a trend, you've got customers buying online now as well. If you had to, I'm not saying trade one of them off, like I'm not saying drop one or the other, but like, so my understanding is retail is critical, right? I don't think a brand can get that pan-India exposure. And D2C, I think it's a great jargon to throw around, but I feel like that represents a small part of your sale. I think retail is where the bigger exposure and revenues come from. But it comes with its own share of challenges. So
definitely,
as long as you're aware and you kind of are not light-footed about it. But yeah, just to get your last sort of concluding thoughts, is it something that you would advise? So what is the prerequisite for a brand to have before they venture into this, right? Can you be an absolutely brand new brand saying, I've got a few lakh rupees saving from my last job, so I'm going to do this retail blowout? Or would you say get some traction on the internet, get some funds, I
would say that's better. I would say like that's why I mentioned that if I had to start now, I would probably do online first, get the traction, get some numbers, get some consumer awareness at least, and then after that go into stores. Because if you go into stores like completely brand new, it's going to be much more challenging, I feel. So, because if you are online and if customers know, then maybe there's some more recognition that happens, when you're in the store, right? And also sometimes the pull happens. So a customer may just go to the store and ask, okay, do you have this brand?
Sure.
So it's definitely better, I think, to do that. But yeah, I think omni-channel approach is very, very important. You need to be in both the places.
Both the places, yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. Can we quickly just read through the comments and see if there's questions? I think I've missed some of the previous ones.
So taxation.
Oh, you got it as well.
Yeah. So taxation would be like, if say your product is 100 rupees MRP, then you first, like divide by 1. Like whatever your tax slab is, basically like if it's 12%, then so divide by 1.12. Then that figure, then you give 35% margin to the retailer. Then there's another, then that figure that you come at, then again you divide by 1.12 and you get the distributor price basically, and then 10%, then you get the distributor price, and then you again have, so there are obviously multiple tax slabs in a way, right? So that's how you kind of, like you can't just do 35% off the MRP. First you remove the tax, then you take out the retailer margin, then you remove the tax, then you take out distributor margin, then you remove the tax, and then you bill your distributor. That, I hope that's clear.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jasjeet has another question. So do you pay for fees per month or per item? Jasjeet, I think she said you pay the one-time listing.
One time, yeah, it's not per, yeah.
And then...
per item, of course, the margin is there.
Yeah, but no monthly cost, right?
Unless you want visibility, if you want like a particular shelf or, something like that, then you have to pay per month.
There's another question by Preeti. When we go to retail, there are many operational processes issues since we started being a D2C brand. We may have to change business model. Then are we really D2C? No, you're not D2C because you're B2B2C.
Yeah.
These jargons always throw me off.
Right.
iPhone, you have to change your name. The one who got the printer ka GS1 code. Please share that detail.
Yeah, that's something everybody would like, I think.
I think iPhone is also asking, I'm sorry I'm calling you iPhone, but that's how your name is saved. Apologies. But they're asking for, can you share a little about inventory softwares? Are there any best practices of softwares? Which ones you use, what you would recommend?
I mean, maybe I'm not the right person. We've been using Tally till now, so
okay.
Not really using softwares, but I've heard Zoho and all are good, so yeah.
Okay. Old school Tally.
Yeah. In the manufacturing setup, it's very challenging to implement so many software.
Correct. But like just because now tech is such a big part, right, of everyone's jargon and everyone talks everywhere. Even B2C brands want to like masquerade as a tech business, So how much, like what kind of time are you spending towards building out tech, or is that?
We use like for our D2C sales, we use like Unicommerce, for inventory management, things like that. Like for the offline sales, we are not really using any software, just Tally,
Okay. Shrikant has, I think, the most pressing question from everyone. Where do you get distributor leads for the modern trade channel? Like, how does one go about contacting them? Because I Googled them and I got a bunch of them and they're very unresponsive, and email communication seems like, no one is.
Yeah, they're not very good on email and all of that.
So
distributors, what I have done is two things. One is, so we took part in a lot of these trade shows, you know, the B2B shows that happen, Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. Either we put up stalls or we visit. So then you end up meeting a lot of distributors there, because generally they also put stall or they come visiting. You know, if you're putting up a stall, then they'll be visiting you. And that's how I think I've got most of my distributors from the trade shows I did, like, you know, early in the days. Apart from that, I think if you really do, like, you know, just want to hustle, just go to the store which you think you want to keep your product in. Try to just chat up the, you know, store guys and ask them, you know, like pick up some product which you feel is like relevant and similar positioning as yours, and ask them, you know, who's your distributor for this. So I've done that also, you know, to like say just go to a modern bazaar, you know, talk to one of the store guys, pick up some product and ask them, you know, who distributes this to you, who supplies this to you. I mean, that takes more time, I guess, and you probably have to talk to them a few times before they give it to you. But that is one approach that also works as well. You can just ask them for their contact, like who supplies it to you that way.
That's a good idea, man. Because I did that very briefly. I didn't like pursue it all the way, but that's a good idea because they're happy to share. If you've got a similar product, at least the one I spoke to, they're happy to share.
If you're nice to them, you know, just be a little nice to them. They anyway feel important then, you know, so they do share. It's not like they don't.
Correct. And I think Vishal just added to your point. He said trade fairs help a lot. There's Annapurna happening next month in Bombay for those who are here. This month, 15, 16. So those in Bombay should definitely go.
I think trade shows are great. You know, whether you take part in them or whether you visit them, there's a lot of places that you can really get connection with.
Yeah. Distributors, GT, MT and e-commerce, 3 different channels have to work differently.
Yeah, definitely. So of course, GT is, I think, a more physical visit approach, because these GT people will not really be online that much. You know, they won't be in trade shows so MT, I think is MT distributors will probably get more through trade shows, and GT will I think have to like go physically to the stores and figure out, you know, who is supplying to them and stuff like that. And e-commerce, of course, is a different thing altogether.
Yeah. Someone's asked, do the distributors ask the brand to fund feet on the street or do they invest?
So this comes again, so just the GTMT is general trade and modern trade, basically. That's just saw his question. So again, it comes back to the same point like I mentioned. So if you have a distributor who's doing distribution and marketing, you know, so if you see some labels, there are some big companies, they do marketing for brands as well. So then the label will say distributed and marketed by, you know, so any FMCG product, or if you're on your label, there are 2 things. There's manufactured by and there's marketed by. So like in my case, it's the same for both. You know, it says manufactured and marketed by because we are doing our own marketing. But there are certain brands which, you know, prefer a distributor to do the marketing. So then manufactured by might be your details and then marketed by might be the distributor's details. So if they're doing marketing for you, then they are supposed to invest because then they'll also take a higher margin. Then probably like take another 5% of, you know, your MRP or whatever. So then they are supposed to have the sales guys, they are supposed to invest and they are supposed to do listing and all of that. But if they are just doing distribution for you, then no, you need to have your own sales team. You have to have your feet on the ground. And that actually works because I've done both of these things, and having your own feet on the ground works better. So initially I was with the distributor who was doing my marketing as well. And what happens is like, they don't really care because their salesperson is going to go with 10 different brands and he won't have a sales target for your brand specifically, you know. So he will sell the low hanging fruit basically. And maybe also what used to happen is that our POs were not fulfilled. We would not get POs, our stock was not there. But then the moment like we switched to like, you know, having our own salespeople and the distributor just doing the distribution for us, not marketing, then of course, then you have more data, you know, there's more like, you know what's happening on store, you get daily updates from your sales team, all of that. So I would say the better approach is to have your own feet on the ground, because then only you'll have the clarity and communication from them. Otherwise, if you give marketing to somebody and they are using their salespeople, it's very hard to even get information of what's going on.
But I have a question. So distributors obviously have the right to not accept your product, right? They have to believe that the product will sell and it makes money for them.
Of course, yeah.
So okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that distributors also market your product, and then if they don't, and if your feet on the ground, which means if you start distributing to other cities, you have a small sales team there. And
typically what the best practice is that the moment you open a market, or this is something I've learned from experience and by making mistakes, is that if you want to open a market, the first thing you have to do is hire a salesperson over there, you know, sales officer who's going to be, because that person then will ensure that he goes to the store and then your POs will come regularly. Because he is responsible for talking to the store guys and telling them, "Acha, ye stock kam ho gaya, so please release the PO for this item, this many quantity," right? The distributor does not do that. So the distributor will just he'll get the PO on email and then they will just fulfill it. They'll and the distributor will take care of the payment bit in a way. So that's not your salesperson's job if the payment. But to make sure that the stock is there, the visibility is there. That the stock is not kept niche upar, it's kept on proper eye level, or the placement is good. It's not in the wrong section. All of that is your own salesperson's job in a way. So I think that's my learning, is that if you open a market, like tomorrow you want to open, say, Hyderabad, first thing, open a sales, like get a salesperson there, get a distributor. These two people you need to kind of kickstart in a way.
Got it. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Okay. So in terms of questions, I think we've covered all. Does anyone have any more questions? Do you want to open up for like a verbal Q&A? Anyone wants to have?
Yeah, sure.
Show of hands. I want to go to gallery. Contract manufacturing. Vash got added to the group today. I think he's in the contract manufacturing field. But can we talk about contract manufacturing? Do you have any experience with that and how that fits into our?
So we do private label for a couple of brands. So we do white labeling and we make products for them. I've not done the other reverse. I've not ever contracted my manufacturing to anybody else. For me, I think it depends on what kind of products you're making. I feel that our strength is really our products and the production and everything. And our processes are also very, very unique. They're not the standard processes that most manufacturers follow. So it's hard to outsource it. But yeah, I mean, it's, I think, a great opportunity for sure, especially depending on what kind of products you have. And we do white labeling, like we do it for food hall, we do it for some bakeries and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
Where we make products which are not competing with our own. So I don't give them the same flavors. I will not give them the same recipe.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Something which doesn't cannibalize our own brand.
Yeah.
So I think there's no harm in doing that, whether both ways, whether you get it done for your brand or reverse, whatever works. I think it really depends on the products and your model, how it works.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because again, contract manufacturing is a very like commonly dropped term, and a lot of brands I see the labels, so manufactured by whoever, marketed by whoever. So in fact, the brand that's selling the product, who is the founder and the team, is the marketing guys.
Manufactured by somebody. A lot of startups do that. They're just doing the marketing and they outsource the manufacturing bit. I guess at some level it makes sense, especially if the capital required to get machinery for your kind of product, different industries. Right? And when you scale up, it's challenging. Like even for me, when we scale up, it is challenging to do it on our own without machinery or capex investment, all of that. So, but it really depends on your stage in your growth and what you do and where you want to go. Really.
Agreed. Shrikant has a question. What do you feel about startups sharing their sales team till scale kicks in?
I think it's a good idea as long as you can ensure that the salesperson has two different targets, because that's why typically what happens when you share the resource, then if you don't give them specific targets for like X brand and Y brand, and they will end up selling the one that sells more, easily that way. So it's not a bad idea. It's something which we've not done, but we have explored it. But I think it makes sense, when you don't have that much budget. And as long as, I think what we need to be sure of is that, okay, he had the sales resource has specific targets for your brand, apart from the other. So then he knows exactly that what we have to do,
So also, I feel like sometimes I've been at stores and I've seen sales guys coming in. There's a very specific skill set that they possess, right? And I'm wondering, what is the best way to find them? I wouldn't guess that LinkedIn is the best place to hire those guys. So what's like you said, if you're opening up a market in Hyderabad and you want to hire someone local there, how would you go about the hiring process? I know this is not off topic, but if you can talk about
Sometimes, I mean, I've also got sales resources through distributors, because, they are there, they know people, obviously they work with them. So sometimes we've got resources through the distributors, sometimes of course Naukri, typical.
Sure.
And sometimes even from the store guys, like, if you know a store manager well, and, they also know obviously all these sales guys, right? So even from store guys, if you have a good relationship, you can ask them as well. So I got my Delhi sales guy through one of the store guys at Modern Bazaar. So things like that. Yeah.
Okay. This Vash is insisting that you should stop your white labeling. He's saying, how do you handle your own brand all the while manufacturing for others? How do you maintain formulation integrity?
Because we're not doing the same products for them.
How easy or tough is it to find salespeople or manage them on ground? As I have heard, these local guys are hardest to manage. Do you have any tips to keep them, to have a good working relationship with?
It is very hard, definitely. I think, need to have daily conversations with them. And I think using some software, there's field assist, things like that, which kind of keep a track of their movement, and you know when they've clocked in, clocked out, where they've gone, all of that. And of course, eventually as you grow, you need like say a zonal head or RSM or somebody to manage them in a way when you can't do it directly. So, but yeah, I think daily conversation, like typically we have a WhatsApp group where they share pictures of their daily visits, which the stores that they're going to, the display and all of that, and they give updates in terms of how many orders they've got and things like that. So communication, of course, has to be there, because with salespeople, they're in the field, you don't know what they're doing. So, and a software, I think, helps, keep them accountable in a way.
Okay. Shubhu has a question. How do you decide target for sales guys, especially in the starting when data isn't, you don't have as much data?
I mean, there has to be certain, like that's why I said, when you're starting off, you first start with smaller stores, maybe, your neighborhood stores or local stores, and you kind of get an idea of the kind of movement that is there. And again, same thing, I think talking to the store guys, asking them about the sales of your competition. Again, it kind of happens over time, of course, you have to build that relationship where they can tell you, but that's a good point where you can understand what kind of movement is happening for a product in that category, for example, and then of course, like initially you can't immediately give them a target, you have to give it a few months, and then after that, once you have some data and you know them, then you give them targets. It takes time, of course, not something that you do from day one.
Got it. Preeti wants to know salary range for salespeople.
So somewhere around 25,000, I would say, is a decent salary. So 20, you could even get somebody for 20K who would be a little more inexperienced. And if you want something, I think 25, 30K is a good range. Is
this one of the functions where you would recommend not cheaping out? Because some functions we all cheap out, intern le lete hai. All of us, I guess, do it. But there are some functions that you'd like a lawyer or a CA, you don't want to cheap out.
Yeah, of course, like sales is your most important function.
Right?
Yeah, so you can't really compromise. So but 25, 30 is a decent range for for somebody who's starting out in a way.
Got it. Mona Bajaj has a question. How do we decide pricing for retail? Shall we offer the same price as our e-commerce site?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, basically, when you go into retail, there's an MRP, right? So legally, you're anyway bound to have the same price. You have to print it on your labels. I don't know if you're doing it online directly, then you don't have to. But I think that's what you have an MRP, right? So the same MRP will apply in stores as well.
But you found this, right? A lot of malpractices companies bump up the price online and they discount the product, and then they close enough to the MRP. Have you observed that in some brands?
I have, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know how they get away with it, because I think legally you have to, I mean, depending on the kind of product, I guess, that you're selling. But if you have a typical label, you have to have an MRP on it. So you can't really, bump up the price. I don't think it's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know people do that. They bump it up. Even on Cred and Amazon and all, I've seen, they bump up the price and they give a discount. Probably they're just getting away with it, but legally you cannot. MRP has to be the same, whether it's online, offline, e-commerce, whether it's Swiggy, Instamart, whatever channel you're using, MRP, it has to be the same.
Got it. Mona, I think you joined late. One of the conversations that Apeksha spoke about was pricing of product, and I think the general metric she threw out was COGS times 4 or 5 should be the cost of your MRP. And also, if your product costs 100 rupees and distributor buys it for 200 rupees, roughly, it's a good sort of metric to strive for. So just ballpark figures, that's a good number to strive for. I don't know if you missed that conversation, but it's another point to your question. Vash, I think he's asking about batch contract manufacturing. So I think we can discuss that perhaps later, Vash, if you don't mind, maybe offline or on the D2C group. Okay, Ashish has a question. As a young product company, would it not be preferable to share distributors and sales force? Is that already happening in a big way? I think you just answered that for someone before.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, but I think what Apeksha said will make sure that both the sales guys both the brands set strong targets. Otherwise, the sales guys have
targets. Because if he's given an overall target, then he'll end up selling the easier selling brand that way. So, yeah. But definitely people younger brands do share Salesforce, and it does happen. I don't know how big it is, but I've heard of it happening, yeah.
Okay. Mona, who asked about the pricing for retail, said we make bags. I guess bags don't have the same, do they operate the same way as FMCG products where there's a label and pricing?
I think you don't have MRPs, probably, maybe that's why you can...
Possibly. But like from a minimum point of view, you're saying get some traction online, see if your product, there is that basic fit. If customers are wanting to buy, then maybe to start your retail journey, maybe start with your local retail shops, the Kirana shops. And that kind of gives you.
The thing is, if you jump into, and I've made this mistake, because I listed products in retail without really testing them out, paid a listing fees for it, and then turned out that it does not. So I made this product which was called orange mustard. It was a very innovative product like 7 years back, and I think the market was not really ready for it. And there was no online at that time, and so I tested in a few farmers markets and things like that, and responsible, and I listed it in retail. And then the sales were just a disaster. It just did not move. I just got a lot of RTP, eventually had to delist it. And, and obviously that money went waste, because once you list a product, then your money is gone, right? Whether it sells or doesn't sell. So I've had a few products like that, which I've listed without really thinking and without really knowing the acceptance in the consumer's mind. And then you end up wasting that money, and it's a big amount to kind of lose, So, so definitely before listing any product, you have to be very, very sure of the fact that it will sell, that there is acceptance, that people really want it, that way.
Right. And if someone has a very wide portfolio, right, let's say 30, 40 products, 20 products, etc. So the new range of products that we're doing, we've got 25, 24 products that we're ready. We're not launching with all. Is there a best practice number that you would recommend? Maybe start with 4 or 6, let's say at retail level. So let's say we get some traction online.
Yeah, I would say start with the best selling ones,
Okay.
If you have different categories, then do your best selling in each category. That's what now we do, because whenever we open a new store, so I have like close to 40 different products. So obviously it's very hard to list all of them. So we generally start with the best selling ones. So I have 5 different categories, for example. So I'll choose like 1 or 2 in every category.
Correct.
And then start with those.
Yeah, it's a good way to test the market, and you're mitigating your risk as well, I guess. Otherwise, 40 products is expensive. Okay, I think one last question Vash wants to ask is, for example, if manufacturing cost is 25 lakh, how much do you allocate to marketing? Is there any metric for that?
I don't know what manufacturing costs, but I know that typically marketing, like 10% of your top line is what we think of. And I don't know in like relation to manufacturing costs, but.
So when you say top line, you mean 55 rupees. You don't mean 100 rupees, right?
Yeah.
You're selling at 55. Yeah. So that's also kind of confusing because
I know because in the online space you talk more GMV, right?
Yes.
So when I'm saying top line, it's the price that we are selling to our distributors.
Correct. Should we rely on likes of Upwork, etc., to find freelance package designers, social media marketers, or is there a better way to find good ones? This is a recruitment question, I think. Apeksha, if you want to, otherwise it's cool if.
Not relevant, but I mean, I guess.
Sorry, go on.
No, I'm saying I don't know whichever way it works. Of course, I'm not the right person, I would say, to answer this. I'm still struggling with finding the right people. So.
I just hired a genius on Internshala after like 50 interviews. And like I made 20 offers, no one came back, but I found the one I wanted. But Internshala works for me, it has, and word of mouth works for me. But we are a very, very, very small team. We're a team of 4. So I'm sure you're hiring at scale. And but yeah, I think we've covered all the questions. Any parting words? Apeksha, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it on a working night. You're spending time and talking to like 20 of us who are trying to build something big. And short notice, so appreciate it. Tuesday, Thursday. I think a couple of people couldn't make it today, but apologies to them. But thanks again very much, man. You've been really like candid. You've been very happy to share information. And any parting thoughts, any words of advice for us budding retail seekers?
Word of advice is patience. Like I said, it takes a lot. It's a very slow. It's like it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's what I would say. So offline is more like you see the results slowly versus D2C, where you're spending say 1 lakh on ads in a month and you see the results immediately. But offline, I think it's more of a long-term game, and definitely I think if you want to build a brand, then offline definitely helps in the recall in your customer's mind in a way. And have lots of patience, and if you really want to do it for the long run, not like for the short term, because you won't see the results in the short term.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you very much, Apeksha.
Sure, pleasure to be here.
Happy Ganesh Chaturthi. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been fun, and we should do this more often.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.